Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. We appreciate you being here. Interesting sports stuff to talk about. And not from current day sports, from back in the day where he was a tennis professional. Now, he is John Riggio, and he's an architect in the New York City area, but we've learned that he's also a tennis pro from back in the 80s. It started there, then on to being a prominent architect in the New York area. And we're going to be talking about a whole bunch of stuff, from Japan to Gwen Stefani to Michael Jordan, and on and on and on. John, welcome back. How you doing?
Hi, Steve. How are you?
Good. When we last left off, we were talking about the Japanese team who you played against, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yes, what happened is so from that time I had played with the Pacific, played the Japan team, and the Japan investors, they bought my contract for the $100 million. So the one thing about the $100 million contract is that was published in Newsday sports section, and they told me to look at it. I did see it there. I think there was one problem with the Japan team, with them not having a publicist. So my name, in fact, is located in a great place. It says $100 million, but it doesn't say Carlos Scipio,
which was your sports name. Just want everybody to know that. Okay.
And but the other names on that list, this was at the time when Magic Johnson went into retirement from the 1991-1992. He was one of the top contracts originally, but the top contracts on the list were the basketball player Michael Jordan,
okay,
in basketball. Then it was myself shown there with name, and then after that is Jose Canseco in Major League Baseball. Now, I think one thing at the time I remember was that both of those players were really on the West Coast, and I'm here on the East Coast in New York, and so they also had very large contracts. So I was obviously the number one in tennis, nearly twice as much as anyone else. And it is the other contracts were very large too. And but the other two players were on the West Coast. So I was doing very good. And I think that was shown in writing. It was in the newspaper. And so those were the other people in sports at the time.
I just want everybody to know, so this was a $100 million contract that you had with Japan or the Japanese team?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
And it was with Japan had investors that bought this contract.
Gotcha. And then what happened after that? They bought your contract. Who did they buy it from? Did they buy it from Ross Perot? I'm
Yes,
backtracking. Okay.
They bought it from Ross Perot.
Okay. And then what happened after that? So the Japanese team has the contract. They basically bought you. Does that make sense?
Yeah. As far as sport business is concerned, they bought my contract. They could profit from my tennis playing, but there was a serious requirement. They had to have me play right away in the ATP. And I think all the way from Japan, they have had a lot of problems making contacts. And I usually would help my sponsor. I gave them all kinds of names, told them what to do, how they're supposed to get me playing in the ATP. And unfortunately, from all the way from Japan, they seem to have had serious problems. They were not able to really get me playing. They tried to get me playing with some games that I won because the opponent didn't show up. And then there was some things like that. And I made recommendations to them on what to do, that maybe they need to somehow have the ability to get the ATP to work, maybe get someone higher in their organization also to call over here to get the games going. Because I in fact, I think I had called around to some people, different coaches, try to get some ideas of why they're having problems. And I think that might have been one of it, that the people that were in Japan working on this to have me play, they were having problems. Maybe they weren't very well known here in the U.S. They needed maybe some big names over there. I even suggested maybe getting a sport lawyer over there to help sort this problem out. But as far as the that was going, I think what happened was one point was it culminated to where I was able to think of this idea of going to Hawaii. And this is from phone calls, talking to the Japan contacts, talking to people here. And this trip to Hawaii, which I wasn't completely sure was ever going to really come about, that it was going to be a big trip. But it turns out that things did work out pretty good as far as the trip going ahead. I was able to get down there, didn't have any problems driving to Hawaii. And they really did come and meet me at the hotel. I stayed at this Outrigger Hotel, the Maui Outrigger Hotel. It's a nice high-rise hotel. It's a very nice place. My travel agent, they really put a nice hotel package together for me. It was a government trip. And then what happened was they did have some contacts come and meet me there at the hotel. And what happened was pretty good. They reimbursed me the vacation, and I received a $10,000 credit for the appearance. And it turned out to be an appearance also that I was signing autographs as Carlos Scipio. And this is years later, after 1992. This is all the way right at the end of 1995 going into 1996. It was in November 1995. I still have the tickets, copies of them, and I went there. It was right at the end of November 1995. And so things were going good. And when I was there, we started to put together the whole thing about they started to put together this of other entertainers coming to see me. So when I was there at that time, there was another entertainer. There was Gwen Stefani, and she has a whole group called the Harajuku Girls, and she also has a musical group. And she was there making some contacts, some concerts and everything. And what happened is,
so wait, let me make it, John. I want to make sure I have that right. So you're in Hawaii, and then Gwen Stefani is there, and she's trying to do her thing, I guess, promote back then. Yeah, it was pretty new for her. So she had a group that she was with before she became famous as a solo star. So, and then you ran into her there?
Well, I think she was already a star there in Japan. She was living in Japan. I did just a quick check on the thing here, and I have a picture I could just show you. This is her. That's her with the Harajuku girls from Japan, and so they brought her in to meet me, and I talked to her for a few minutes. And we just talked about different things, what she's doing, what I'm doing there, and things like that. It was very nice to meet her. It was good. And what happened also there is she was really big with the photographers. They all rushed in, paparazzi rushed in, taking a lot of pictures.
I want to jump in here and say this because it's very relevant to what you're talking about. And I think I had it wrong. I thought she was in Hawaii, but she was in Japan. Do I have that right?
Well, what happened is she was living in Japan. I think you'd have to look at her biography, but she lives in Japan. She's from the U.S. She's American born, and she was living in Japan. And
well, I want to share because this is yes, and she just said about a week or two ago, she made a statement, said, one day I just turned around and this is, I believe, a quote. She says, "My gosh, I'm Japanese." Now, I don't know that she is. I don't think she is, but because she lived in Japan for all those years, she feels like she is Japanese, like she adopted the culture. So interesting that you guys crossed paths there in careers. How fantastic.
She was in town because she was making some concerts at the same time.
Wow.
And then the sponsor, I think they had some connection with Miss Gwen Stefani. They were able to have her come to the hotel and talk to me. That was the reason she was there. She wasn't staying at the hotel. I was staying at the hotel there, but she came to the hotel to meet me in person. That was really their goal, was to have me talk to her.
Wow. And if I remember correctly, it was right around, actually, when I think about it, and I played those songs as they were hits when they came out, she was with No Doubt. That's the name of the group, and their biggest songs were "Don't Speak," and it was right around the mid '90s. So that's probably what she was promoting when she was in Japan. So how interesting! That's
Yes,
huge.
yes, because we met in Hawaii.
Okay,
So we met
okay,
in the island of Oahu, Hawaii, and this is in the district area of Waikiki.
wow,
So we were
wow.
there, and it was an excellent location. They were able to put this together. I talked to the tennis players also from Japan, arranging to schedule some matches in the near future. So everything went very good, and so that was good, and I was there, and uh,
Hmm.
so there was some interesting things. I think one thing when I was there. I made some new friends. I made a new friend at the hotel, and I think one funny thing happened was I was there signing autographs at the hotel, and my new friend, she walked out of the elevator and she sees me there signing autographs because I had met her as an architect. I was working as an architect, and I had met her as an architect, and she saw me there, and I did never told her I was a pro tennis player, signing autographs or anything. So it was a funny surprise, and I think she just like waved over to me, and then so that was very interesting, and I think that was one interesting thing, because then later I was talking to her again, and yeah, she was really shocked about the whole thing with the entertainment and the tennis, and she just was sort of used to just basic like professional work. So
Wow.
she really didn't want to get involved with any kind of entertainment or anything. So she sort of stayed away from it. But that was another interesting thing.
Hmm.
And I think that also is one interesting thing about, like, with architect work as my job and everything in profession, was I think most people usually don't ask about tennis. They don't say, Johnny, you still playing pro tennis? Are you still going, to play tennis and signing autographs and things like that? And that's one interesting thing about what was happening. That sort of happened with my new friend. She didn't want to get involved at all with any type of entertainment. So that was an interesting thing that took place there.
At what point, John, did you pivot from tennis to architecture? Was it
I
in the
Yes.
80s?
Well, I think the whole thing with the architecture was really a separate career that I had, and it was a means, of course, to make income and things like that, with the not knowing if there's going to be a full income coming from tennis.
Yep.
So I think I had discussed before about people just making a basic income, and then you would have a side job to supplement that. And that's how the whole thing with the architect profession came about, and how I was working in the architect profession. So that was pretty good. And
What
so,
when
but
did
that happened from the very beginning. That happened really, like, when I was making my college decisions. Going from
okay.
graduating high school, going into the next years, is when I started to go to college to become an architect, and that would provided me with a whole separate income that is independent of tennis.
Wow. So it really you had your eye on architecture when you were doing the tennis, even the very beginning, when you were in, yeah, let's say your low 20s, upper teens, you were already looking at architecture as a, plan B or a fallback while you were doing the tennis?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. I guess, you have the side gig because you never know what's going to happen with the tennis, but the tennis seemed to have taken off pretty well. But you had the backup plan anyway for architecture.
Yes, that's correct. So this trip to Hawaii turned out to be very successful, much more successful than I even envisioned, and that was very good. At the time, also putting this trip together to go to Hawaii was took some help. I had my travel agent help me with it. I had two other female entertainers that I was friends with. I was talking to them. They were giving me encouragement to come to Hawaii. They even wanted to stop over in Hawaii too. This was really good, especially after I told them how successful it was with Gwen Stefani. Now, they didn't tell me I was going to meet her at the time, but
Sure.
it turned out to be very good. And then at that time is when I went back and talked to Delilah. So I think the last time I talked about all the interesting things about what happened to Delilah, I think a couple of added points I wanted to make. One was the year that I had helped her out of her problems that the father created for her were really like 3 years before I went to Hawaii. That took place way long ago, and this going to Hawaii was like 3 years later. And so when I talked back with Delilah, that is when the whole thing started to take place, when she got word about the situation with the Japan team and Hawaii and everything like that. And then one added point about Delilah, because I discussed how I knew a lot of people in Olympic sports, but in fact, she is another Olympic hopeful in ice skating. She used to play at the same tennis ice skate center with my other friend Heidi. They used to do the ice skating, and Delilah was an excellent ice skater also. She was very good at ice skating and was another Olympic hopeful at the time too. So she did have a sport ability, which was very good.
So at that time, Delilah was a skater.
Yes, when she
Oh,
started off as a young skater, and I was there at the Westbury Skate Center. In fact, they both of them, Heidi and Delia, they both used to help out with Dorothy Hamble's Ice Capades. I think everyone might have heard of Dorothy Hamill Ice Capades. They used to have a show.
yeah,
They
yeah.
used to work as background skaters.
Oh my gosh, what a memory that brings back. And even back in the day, I remember taking my kids to you know, Disney on Ice was another one. But yeah, Dorothy Hamill's Escapades, Ice
So I think
Capades. I'm
I think
sorry.
that whole thing with the ice skating is somewhat similar to tennis. In fact, I kept it quiet for them too. The whole thing with them skating, ice skating, and then even being Olympic hopefuls, and the whole thing with that ice show was really something I had to keep quiet. They asked me to keep it quiet for they don't want people bothering them. I mean, that's what was happening.
Wow. Wow. Interesting how these two young women were, call it, sports motivated. They're doing their thing in terms of ice skating, and there you are, doing your thing as tennis, and you guys are, in your 20s, right?
Yes. So I think one thing about the thing about talking to the Japan team after they uh bought my contract is I was going through things with the Japan sponsor, and I was explaining to them the same thing. I don't really necessarily have to even go to Japan and work out those problems, because there was one of the employees they had that had a big problem. I told you they ended up having to arrest him and all kinds of things like that. But over the years in between, I was discussing that they could just play a lot of American tournaments. There was all kinds of American tournaments that were very important, large tournaments. And I remember some of them. One of them was the Chicago tournament, and this I played at Sutton East. This is another tournament where the favorite player was Guillermo Villa. He was expected to win that tournament, but in
Oh,
fact, I was an excellent player. They didn't know me in the Chicago tournament, and I was able to win against Guillermo Villa in that tournament, and I won the whole tournament, the whole Chicago tournament. And that Chicago tournament turned into the Chicago Open. I know the Chicago Open has a stadium these days, but originally it was the Chicago tournament, and that's was one big one. I think from there was some other ones in that area. One's in Nashville, Dallas, Texas, things like that. There was Miami, Florida. There were all kinds of important tournaments that I was explaining them to play and get me into those. And even the tournaments that might be local around the U.S. Tennis Center weren't necessarily the ones I need to play. I could play anything within the 50 states very easily. I thought it was easy for them to arrange this, but they really had difficulty doing it all the way from Japan. That was difficult for them.
John, when you watch, and just a minute or two left, but I was watching tennis the other day. I was at a sports bar. The Giants game was on, and there was another TV. I don't want to admit this to, Giants fans, but I was watching the tennis. It was on one of the other TVs. and I don't know who was playing, but I love playing tennis. I play like very, very infrequently, but I start analyzing what they're doing. When you're watching a game, even on TV, do you find yourself watching the moves, how they're hitting, what they're doing? Does it, because it's in you now, since you were a tennis pro back in the day?
Um, yeah. I think watching TV, watching tennis players is good. That can help you stimulate your tennis game. Yeah, that is very good to watch them and play.
But do you analyze? Do you analyze the game as they're?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. And do you say to yourself, yeah, you know what? She or he probably should have hit it a little bit differently, put it with a different spin on the ball. It would have went in a different direction. Is that how deep you watch the game?
Yes, I do. I see all those different things of how they hit the ball. If they're using a slice to hit the ball back, things like that. If they're able to really hit the ball across the court. Yeah, of course. When I watch tennis games, I do see all those things.
Wow.
And I think one interesting thing about also years ago was when I was in high school. I was saying that my school, Jericho High School, was a very good location because it had Anthony Cambria there and as administrator for the U.S. Tennis Center, and then there were also two other players that were pro players before me. The one that was the closest age to me was John Schmidt. He was another pro player. He was 2 years older than me, and then the next player before that was Jimmy Arias. He was there. He was 4 years older than me, and he used to play there also. And I knew both of them and used to play some tennis with them. So they were also pro players that were there.
Wow. I have to believe that since you grew up on Long Island, just outside of New York City, one of the largest cities in the world, would you say that helped you in your career, that you were next to a big city?
Yes, certainly true. Yes, playing here in New York City was really made it very convenient. I think if I didn't live around here, if we live far away, a lot of players that are very good at tennis, they end up having to move here to New York City.
Yeah.
And they have to live here to really stay playing with the U.S. Tennis Center until they get on some kind of a circuit. They might get in with one of the camps someplace in the country and play tennis, but most of them have to come here to the U.S. Tennis Center. They also call it the National Tennis Center, right. and that's where all international players are coming here to meet and play tennis.
Yeah, and final thought.
I think the next biggest center from the U.S. Tennis Center, they were saying, was really in Paris, France. Had a very large camp of tennis players. A lot of people were going there also to play.
Very coincidentally, we both grew up on Long Island. And when you mentioned some of those huge tennis players, huge sports players, being on Long Island, not far away from where I grew up, it's almost hard to fathom that they were here playing, practicing. Remember even one time you mentioned, some of the players piloting their own planes, getting their own license, which was something that, you had a joy, a love of, to know that they're one of the small airports they'd be flying out of. Just fascinating stories, John. I love it. The website is johnriggio.com, RIGGO.com. He's an architect and also a tennis pro from back in the day. If you want to learn more, it's all on the website. And it is always fascinating talking with you, John. I appreciate you being with us today.
Great. Thanks for talking to you, Steve.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, I mean, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.